Mr. President, members of the City Council, thank you for the opportunity to update you and the public on what is going on around the city. And there's a few things that I want to cover tonight. The first thing that I would like to cover is give you an update on where we are with the National Disaster Resilience Program. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Let me at first show you the upcoming meeting schedule. We have changed the dates of the Finance and Improvement and Airport Committee. We moved that to Monday the 27th. And the Planning Commission will follow thereafter. The reorganizational meeting following the election on the 14th will be on Tuesday the 28th at 6:30 p.m. right here. And then everything else will follow the normal schedule. But that's a change from what was publicized previously. And I wanted to make sure you all are aware of that because of the upcoming election next Tuesday. And it's 2 weeks following that, so it'll be on Tuesday the 28th. As you recall from the National Disaster Resilience Competition back in January of this year when we were notified that the city had won, these are the projects that were brought out. The reduced flood risk and increased resiliency, and what we said we wanted to do was a layered strategy of gray, green, and non-structural techniques to reduce risks and costs. And a lot of that ties into what you will see the program is and will continue to become as we continue to engage the public in order to make sure that we're doing things correct. Build affordable, resilient neighborhoods. We continue to look to ways to get people out of harm's way. As you know, we bought out a lot of properties that are associated with the footprint of the flood protection system. And they're also looking at this program to tie into the water storage requirements within the city of Minot to move some additional folks out of harm's way. And that includes the elderly, the disabled, and the homeless first and foremost. Foster economic resilience and diversification. The last thing on there was the concept that we had talked about previously, which is the movement of City Hall and the 911 call center out of the floodplain. And then associated with that is a one-stop social services facility, which I will talk a little bit about here in the next few minutes. We did a Resilience Academy in New York this year, and what we know going forward is the following. We sent 3 of our people, the finance director, the chief resilience officer, and the federal compliance officer. We need to make sure that we measure the metrics associated with that, because I will tell you, it is my opinion, after having received all the guidance and everything, and the Federal Register was finally published this last Friday out of Washington, D.C., Minot, as you recall, was only one of 3 cities that was notified the fact that we were winners. And I will tell you that Minot will and is right now the poster child for the Department of Housing and Urban Development on how small communities can be awarded money and do this right. So we will be under the microscope of the federal government, in my opinion, in the next few years as we implement this program. But as you recall, we wanted to make sure that we won, and we did. And now we have a problem, and that's okay. I'd rather have the problem as opposed to not winning, so I think we did very well. We need to be responsive to needs to the city of Minot, and we need to reflect the values that are in the HUD program. That was emphasized over and over again. And as I said before, there's lots of reporting requirements that the city has to undergo. And that's the reason we need the assistance of some local people and consultants in order to get this program done. And finally, we need to make sure we communicate this so that we can input into the federal system exactly the benefits that we're supposed to be achieving. We have to do this on a monthly basis for the entire time that the program is undergoing within the city. So we have a monthly reporting requirement to HUD to tell them the values that we're achieving, and these things have to be measurable. So we have to come up with these in the next 30 days in order that we can put them into the system. And finally, we have a list of partners that was included in the city's application to that. Some of those are nonprofit agencies. Some of those are companies that were associated with us as well. I've had a number of firms that have come up to me over the last 4 months that said we want to be part of the process and part of the program. What I've told them to do is if you look at the list of approved partners, and those are approved by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, in order that we can facilitate this program over the next 6 years. So if you go onto that list, you find one of those folks, and for us to go to you, what we can do is you can link up with some of those folks that are already approved. If you're not on that list and we need somebody with expertise outside of that list, what we can do is we can go through the formal RFP, RFQ process for any other types of services that we need. But it's very important for you all to understand that we have to follow the guidelines as we go through this. Let me go back one. Preparing additional acquisitions, diminish risk by getting more peoples out of harm's way. What we did was when we looked at the footprint of the flood protection system throughout the city, and as you know, it'll take many years to complete, what we're focusing on right now throughout the community is the first 3 phases of the flood protection system. Once we're able to design and fund and build phase 4 in conjunction with that, we can very easily take about 60% of the people out of harm's way. What about the rest of the folks that live within the valley? We heard over and over again, what are you going to do for us over the next 20 to 25 years? So what we said was we want to make sure that we look at additional areas within the city where we can actually gain value by moving some folks out of harm's way, giving them opportunity to move into a resilient neighborhood so they don't have to wait for the flood protection system in the valley to be completed before they're protected. So we've identified 4 to 5 other areas throughout the community, and as a result of these areas, if we're able to achieve what we say we're going to do, it will actually lower the cost of the flood protection system. So the cost to the citizens of Minot and the cost to the state government will actually be lower by acquiring this additional property, because what it does, it gives us additional storage area, or it changes the location of the flood protection system, changes the wall height, changes the levee, so that we can actually gain more value out of that, all in the line of trying to move people out of harm's way. We will identify potential homes in there. We plan on doing that over the next few months so we can contact these folks that live in this neighborhood. A number of them people have come to the city over the last few years saying, geez, my home's not in that area, but can you acquire my property as well? So we heard this over and over again, so that's the reason that we came up with this system. And all will be evaluated with the Minot floodplain. As you know, that floodplain is going to change drastically, and all of these folks whose homes that we're looking at will lie within the new floodplain. Identify potential public gathering spaces. During the course of this, we heard many, many times over the fact that the public was looking for places around the city where different neighborhoods could gather as a community, and they can do outdoor activities within their own neighborhood as opposed to going someplace else. So instead of just looking at one of these, we're now looking at 3. And those 3 areas are throughout the city. We're going to have our first public meeting on the 24th of June, and we'll have public meetings over the course of the next few months to not only identify the right locations, and there's a number of different partners that we have to talk to in order to make this happen, but also make sure that we get this right so we understand what the folks that are living in that area are looking for, and we're able to provide those types of services to those folks. This has to tie into what the Park District is currently doing, et cetera, so we just don't duplicate something that's not needed. Vulnerable Population Action Plan. I want to remind the City Council the fact that there's a difference between available and affordable. A lot of folks have come up to myself and other folks on the team over the last 6 months and say, what are you going to build additional housing within the area we don't need anymore? Well, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we look at that study, and what we're going to do is we're going to reach out to all those folks that have a stake in this, and all those different agencies, to say what really are our affordable housing needs right now within the city of Minot. I realized that when we wrote the application several months ago, there was that information that there is dated, and so we need to update it, and we're going to do that. So we're going to be putting something online as we create the city's resilient page, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we're going to reach out and try to get as much public input, especially from those folks that have a stakeholder piece of this, in order to make sure we get this information correct. We need to see what's in the city's best interest, and we will do that, and we'll figure out what the scale of this program will be. And then we need to establish resilient neighborhoods. We have a lot of places within the city that after the flood of 2011, some work was started and never completed. You all know where those are. You've seen them just as I've seen them. We put infrastructure in there. Some people came to the area, made a lot of promises, and didn't fulfill it. So what we're going to try to do is pick up the pieces of that and build upon what's already there as opposed to creating something new. And that's the intent that we have going forward. And again, we'll hold additional public meetings in order to make sure that we bring this into fruition. Program milestones, the buyout program. We're going to begin now and trying to get information in so that we can start the offers in the fall of 2016. And we think we can complete the entire program throughout all of the areas of the city that are under the flood protection system by the fall of 2019. Public gathering spaces. Start the meetings now for the public meetings. We'll have public meetings over the next few months. We think we can complete the designs of all 3 of those spaces, or whatever the number ends up being, by May of 2017. and we think we can complete the work on all of the sites by the summer of 2020. Family shelter and vulnerable populations, we need to establish exactly what the need is. We're going to establish our Vulnerable Population Committee again, of which some of you and some of the folks that are in the audience tonight are members of that. And then we want to see exactly what is required, and then we want to make sure that we address this need first and foremost. So that's the reason I put as soon as possible in there, because we think that's the most pressing need that we need to address within the city. And finally, affordable housing and resilient neighborhoods. We have already begun the process to update the housing information, and we think we can develop design and construction period should be between 2017 and 2019, at latest 2020. As you all know, we requested an additional time waiver so that we could take this out till 2022. That waiver was not published in the Federal Register. However, we still expect that waiver to be granted, and we should know that within the next 30 to 45 days when they will publish some additional information. So that's some piece of information that the city does not have at this time yet, but we expect to receive that very soon. Long-term commitments. Everything that we're doing within the city right now has to have a resiliency component. When we look at the city's flood protection system, when we look at the transportation network, when we look at how that ties into the downtown infrastructure project, when we look at all of the things that need to be done in our community in the future, all of it really ties together. The HUD dollars in this program is really just one piece of a puzzle. And as we put this piece of the puzzle together, what is first and foremost the most important thing is community engagement. I beg you to become part of that community engagement. I ask the public to become part of that community engagement. We'll only get this right if we have the input from the people. We have an opportunity to do this right and to do this well for not only the people that are here now, but all the future generations to come. This is a game changer for our community, and as I said before, the HUD piece is a small subset of what we're trying to do, but everything ties together. So, with that, we will launch our webpage on the 10th of June. I have a couple more things, Mr. President, but does anybody have any questions on what I just gave you?
Alderman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Manager, it is abundantly clear that this will be a major transition for this community because you took it upon yourself to find the availability of the resiliency funds, and we entered into that competition, and we did in fact prevail. I would like very much if you would remind the general public who the three cities are that did in fact prevail and how really absolutely unique our position is within the nation in that regard.
Mr. President, Alderman Miller, thank you. I want to tell everybody that we wouldn't have won this application wouldn't have been for all of the people that are right behind me, because having the input with the public was very most important. And I think when you looked at all the cities that actually applied, Minot had the most public meetings and the greatest percentage of participation. That doesn't mean that we need to improve upon that, but we just had a lot of folks. So I want to thank all those folks that were part of that. To answer your question, I can't remember what it was.
The three cities that did
I'm sorry. Alderman
prevail.
I got ahead of myself. New York City.
Yes, sir.
New Orleans.
Yes, sir.
And Minot, North Dakota. Right. And when you look at the dollar amount that was awarded for each of those different communities, if you take the population of New York City, they were awarded $2 per citizen. Minot's was $998 per citizen within the Ward County area.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. Any other questions for the City Manager? Alderman Seymour.
Mr. Mayor, my question is, City Manager, when you read the rules in the Federal Register, were there any surprises in there that kind of surprised you a little bit?
Mr. President, Alderman Seymour, I think the biggest surprise was when I didn't see our automatic waiver. So when they told me you had to do this 2 years faster than you anticipated, I fainted. And then I got up and said, okay, we'll make sure that we address that one more time. I'm very confident the fact that it's going to be done. We made a very good argument, and when we talked to those folks, they said that is coming, so please pick up the city manager and he'll be fine. So
thank you.
Alderman Knoll.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Manager Staab, the question I have is, and when you're talking about surprises, and thank you for bringing that up, the surprise of my life was we're about to approve this agreement, the amendment to the agreement for the CDM Smith for the National disaster resiliency competition. And we got $74 million from the federal government. Am I correct in seeing that we are going to pay CDM Smith $17 million to administer this plan? Is that the correct number?
City Manager, I believe this item is actually on our agenda coming up, Alderman Knoll. So I guess if you want to speak to it now, that's perfectly fine.
Mr. President, Alderman Knoll, I'll be glad to do that. When you look at the entire program, the amount that you see that's listed in front of you is the entire leveraged amount. $74.3 million actually is from the HUD dollars. The other $130-some million is leveraged amounts from the state and or other agencies, varies. But so the total program is $200-some million. The CDM Smith contract that you see in front of you is to provide the services that the city does not currently have. Okay, it's actually about 9.7% of the entire $200-some million contract, which is very reasonable over that period of time. The other thing, as I told some of the folks that were at the committee meeting the other night, is that is a scope of work that is yet to be determined. What I asked those folks to do, because they were very important for us as we wrote the application to ensure the fact that we were successful, is to show me the scope of work if we gave the entire program to you and said, we just want you to do this. There's obviously pieces and parts of that, and maybe we'll pull out something. I'll give you an example. If we say the community gathering space, we'll do that in-house. So everything associated with that, all that level of effort will be done in-house by the people within the city. But we still have to determine exactly what that scope is going to be, exactly what the requirement is, exactly how many people we have on hand, and do we have the staff on hand in order to execute those things. So yes, the amount in there that is written is 9.7% of the entire contract, but I feel very confident that over the course of the next 6 years, as we develop what that scope is, there's some things that we're going to pull back, obviously, because we don't want them to execute it. But I wanted to make sure that we had everything that was encompassed in there. So when I look at what the level of effort it's going to take us to do it, if we do it in-house, what is the estimate on what it's going to take, and how many people do we have to bring in, or do I have to shift to bring some people in that have the whiteboard space and the skill set in order to do that?
Mr. President, again.
Follow?
Yeah. Well, that's good, because I must have misread the way that thing was written in the paper, because it looked to me like it was $74 million and $17 million to administrate, and that's 23%. So I was a little nervous about those numbers. So I know we're going to act on that, but I just wanted to let you know what I thought about that.
Okay. Alderman Miller.
Thank you. A follow-up on that question. Would I be accurate, Mr. City Manager, in saying that when you incorporate the leverage funds, in addition to the award for the resiliency competition, that we find that the contract with CDM Smith is actually, in fact, under 10%, which is well within any norms at the national level, and particularly at this level regarding those dollar amounts?
Mr. President, Alderman Miller, you're exactly correct. What we did is we went back, Mr. President, over a period of time to see exactly what are some of our consultant contracts we were paying as far as the percentage-wise. Most of them ranged in the range between 10 and 12%, so I felt pretty comfortable when I looked at the bottom line to this.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the city manager? Okay. Were you going on to the construction update then, sir?
Mr. President, yes. With your permission.
Please proceed.
Okay. What I want to show you very quickly is some of the other things, and I've overstepped my time, so I apologize to all of the folks that are here tonight. The road closed, you can see exactly what we're going to be doing over the parking ramps are now done. We have the skin to put on the outside of the building, and we need to do that over the next few months. And then it's up to the developer in order to determine exactly what's going to happen as we go forward and the timeline associated with that. The downtown infrastructure project, you can see that work is progressing there very well. When I asked the city engineer, and you're going to have a report right in front of you that tells you where we are. When I asked the city engineer to give me a project update, we're actually right on schedule, so we haven't seen any other issues. There's a lot of lessons learned last year that we're able to apply this year. And you can see the first milestone is upcoming here in about 4.5 to 5 weeks. The Oak Bridge project, you see the detour out there, and you can see that will be closed till approximately July 8th. And again, we see no issues associated with that, so that work should be done on time. The water treatment plant, if you've been out there and you can see the amount of work that's going on in the water treatment plant, there's a large amount of construction. As you all know, we closed 16th Street on the 31st of May, and we anticipate that being back open prior to the start of the school year, which is very critical for our bus routes and all of the folks that are taking the kids to school next year as well. 6th Street pump project right outside of this building. I even had asked last week, why are we digging up the street one more time? Because I don't know, I should know everything, but I don't. So I had asked that one more time. And what happened was we had a previous contractor on there that had done some damage to the street. So we actually added that requirement to the folks outside so we can get that repaired back. And they actually laid the second level of that asphalt, so that street should be open here very, very shortly. But again, I appreciate the patience of the public as we finally bring this thing to closure. We'll get that pump tested, and then they'll be out of there.
Mr. Staab, I had somebody ask me again after, we had the recent rain last week or whenever it was, somebody said, well, we tried to drive through there and there was some water in that bottom of that thing, and when is this thing going to be live? And I think most people don't realize that the new pumps haven't been activated in there yet, and so that's why the symptoms are unchanged when we have a rain event. But is there a target date for that activation? Do you know?
21st of this month.
Thank you, sir.
37th Avenue project. That's going on in the southwest part of the city, and you can see the expected completion date is later this year before the onset of winter. We haven't seen any problems associated with that as well. Employee recognition. What I'd like to do is I'd like to recognize two folks, and Mr. President, in front of you, just to your right, you see two city coins that are laying there. And I'd like to call these individuals up, but first I'd like to read you this letter. I wanted to share with you my experience about two of Minot City employees. I'd spoken with Miranda Schuler about the alley behind my house, which is an access point for my garage late last fall or early winter. It had been damaged due to the demolition of the home next to me. I had nothing but a big muddy mess, a big muddy mess. I spoke with Miranda, who spoke with Mr. Rick here, who said that they'd do something, and that happened today. There were very two nice men in the alley early this morning, Nick Reynolds and Guy Strom. Would you stand up, please? Yeah, she did say nice and good looking, so I'm glad that part was correct. They were so very nice, polite, pleasant, and hardworking. I believe all the attributes you want in an employee. There were 5 loads of sandy gravel mixed, dumped, and spread in the alley. They used a blade and smoothed it all out, swept the excess off the driveway, and cheerfully finished up late this afternoon. Thanks to these two guys, my alley is beautiful. I had all exceeded all my expectations. I'm very grateful. So what I'd like to do, Mr. President, with your permission, if you guys would go up there, the President of the City Council is going to give you a city coin. So can we give these guys a round of applause, please? Thank you for your service. Just for your reminder, Just for you two guys as a reminder, the coin rule is next time you see President Janser any place, in any eating establishment, if he doesn't have his coin on him, he owes you an adult beverage of your choice, just to let you know. And I haven't given him one, so I know he doesn't have it. It is. Chief Olson.
President Janser, members of council, I just want you to indulge me for a few minutes. I would like to tell you about the actions of 3 of your police officers. This time I'd like to call forward Officer Kevin Love and Officer Kevin Corey and Officer Rayshawn Love. Also, I'd like to call forward Mrs. Terry Aldrich. I'm just going to read a report I received from one of my sergeants, and then Mrs. Aldrich has a letter she would like to read. April 22nd,
Minot Central Dispatcher received a call about an unconscious 64-year-old male who had fallen in the bathroom but was still breathing. Officers Jared Foley, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, he's away at training, and Rayshawn Love were the first to arrive. They determined the male was not breathing and was in cardiac arrest. They started CPR immediately to include the use of the AED twice until emergency medical personnel arrived. When Officer Kevin Corey arrived, he escorted the wife into another room so he was able to speak to her and comfort her. Officer Corey then assisted medical personnel in the ambulance by continuing to perform chest compressions en route to Trinity Hospital. Once the patient arrived at Trinity, medical personnel continued to work on the patient and were able to revive him. At the time of this letter, it says the patient is currently recovering in the intensive care unit. I'd like to call forward Ms. Terry Aldrich.
Members of the council and city manager, you know, I have had so many wonderful opportunities to speak to you on a variety of issues that I am very passionate about. But I never expected that I would have the opportunity to say thank you to you for the Minot Police Department for their preparedness, for their prompt response, for their level of uncommon care. Because on April 22nd, you heard what the chief said. That was my husband. It touched my heart. Their work and what they did on that night impacted my life and the life of my family for years and years to come because of their prompt response, because of their preparedness, because of their training. I have my husband. My family has their dad. And it means more than words can say. And I thought about reading my daughter's letter that was printed in the Minot Daily News, but I would just like to read the last paragraph to you because it speaks our gratitude in a way that I couldn't. Her words are wonderful. So she says, it's hard for me to really even express my emotion with this because words don't really cut it. But when I arrived home, as soon as I could after talking to my mom, Officer Love was there with his wife looking for her. He wanted to know how she was doing. And in the days that followed, he visited my dad in the ICU, checked upon my mom, mowed the grass for her at their house. I feel like I've gained a family member. I know that that neither of these officers did anything that they did for recognition. But I feel with a world that often sensationalizes negativity, good ought to be recognized. They went above and beyond. The call of duty saved my dad's life. And Rayshawn continues to be some kind of guardian angel to us. Please see that they receive the highest honors because they have demonstrated the highest form of humanity. Love. Thank you.
So they were nominated for North Dakota Peace Officers Association Life Saving Awards. So I'll ask Mrs. Aldrich to please present them. And this is for Officer Kevin Corey. And this is for Officer Rayshawn Love. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Chief. City Manager?
Last thing I have, Mr. President, is just the 2017 budget schedule, the key dates. As you can see, we'll submit the annual plan presentation to the Civil Service Commission on June the 15th, and the second reading of the budget will occur on September 19th. Last item, Mr. President, is I wanted to show you this because he's not here. I thought I could do this. And I did tell him I was going to do this. The mayor is going to be in the dunking booth this Friday, so for all of you up here or anybody behind me that wants to partake in this, Mayor Barney knows that his picture was going up on the docket tonight. So thank you
It's
very
very
much.
unexpected news, but we appreciate it.